I can't even see them very well. Yeah. You have to be my second command. Is it on? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me employ our guest. So please move forward, occupy the seats closer to me. Yeah, could you please move forward to and occupy the seats closer to the front, please? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yes, yes. Yeah. I want to welcome you all to today's event. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an event to discuss what has happened in the first half year, and what will the view be in the second half of the year. And I welcome you once again. I'd like to share certain things, certain information before we go on. In the meantime, we'll start with an opening prayer, calling on our Creator to bless us as we commence on this discussion and the conference proper. I would like to call on Abosede to help us with an opening prayer. Yes, Director, Membership, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Almighty everlasting Father, we want to say thank you. Thank you, Lord Father, for today. Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you, Lord Father, for joining mercies, most especially for this event for today. Father, we commit today unto your holy hand. We ask in your infinite mercy that you take control of every activity, from the speakers, from the deliberation, even the events as a whole. Father, we ask that everything that we should do today should be to your glory and your honor. In Jesus' mighty name we have prayed. Yeah. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Before we proceed, I'd like to tell you a few things about my fascination with colors. I mean, this place is quite colorful. If you see colors, they have when they come in sequence, they have more meaning. Like if you see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and of course violet. You know, we are talking about the rainbow. What about, I'll tell you a particular experience. There was a time I was standing beside a Greek friend of mine. And he asked me, what is the color of your national flag? Before I could say anything, he did say that I think it is white, green, and white. And I looked at him and said, no, you're completely wrong. That's not Nigeria. And I was kind of not happy with him. And then when you see the color green, you are talking about natural vegetation. They have meaning, colors. And when you see white, which is what this hall is decorated in, you are asking for peace. So we have a very good combination of white and green. And someone was called me and just a few moments ago and said, the hall is beautiful. And my response was that, I mean, it's to the guys and ladies who did it, who made it beautiful. So, but when you see the colors mixed, green, white, green, you're talking about Nigeria. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let us please rise in honor of our country, Nigeria, for its national anthem. You can see it. We have in our midst here very distinguished guests. I would like to recognize them one after the other. Although the list is not complete, we will continue to recognize them during the course of this event. I'm starting from the Deputy President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We call him Bishop Gabriel Idahosa. Please stand up for recognition. We also have in our midst somebody whose first engagement on the phone gave me a lot of hope. He hadn't seen me before now, but after speaking with him for a few seconds, I knew impossible was going to be possible. He is the Group Executive Director, Cordros Capital, Femi Ademola. I have a madam. She wants to get things perfectly done. Right time, right moment, rightly worded. God saved you if you don't get these three things well. It will always be, Tony, that's not how we want it. Use these words. Let me not go further. We have Dr. Chinyere Almona. She is the Director General, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I also have one, I call him Egbon. He's a Vice President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also the committee chairman in my own department. I copied an expression from him. I was like, you get the point, you get the point, you get the point, you get the point. And when I started saying, you get the point at home, my wife was like, where did you get this from? I said, oh, it's from my boss in the office. Ladies and gentlemen, we have in our midst Prince Abimbola Olasore. Yeah, we also have one of our panelists, a stickler to time. He's been my friend for many, many years. If he's to pay for his service, I would not be able to. we have Dr. Oho Okiti in our midst. He is the former managing director, Business Day newspaper, and now the CEO of Think Business Africa. Representing MAN, we have the Vice President, Lagos Zone, is Prince Okoje. Could you please stand up for recognition? MAN means Manufacturer Association of Nigeria. I will continue to recognize as I get their names clearer. Next on the agenda, on the program, is the opening address by Bishop Gabriel Idahosa. A round of applause for the Deputy President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
The Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce presents, Prince Bimbo Lcci and Mrs. Yemisi Daramola. Our Life Vice President present, Mr. Becky Bagiz. Executive Director, before the Executive Director, let me quickly, even though she's there, DG, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Chinyere Almona. The Executive Director, Cordros, our sponsors, as we all can see. Very proud of your sponsorship, Mr. Femi Ademola. Dr. Okiti has been earlier mentioned. He's a big friend of the house, and we are extremely grateful that you are here again today. The panelists who are online with us today, the media executives, we have, as has been mentioned, leaders from other member organizations like Manufacturer Association of Nigeria. We want to thank you for joining us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure that on behalf of our President, Dr. Michael Olaole Cole, CON, to this event. And let me again formally welcome and thank our sponsors, Cordros Capital Limited, one of the foremost investment banking houses in this country. The Media Economic Review and Outlook is an annual event designed to review key policy developments and macroeconomic performance in the first half of the year. It also discusses outlook and expectations for the second half, focusing on risks and opportunities. LCCI over the last 135 years has consistently engaged governments and advanced the growth of the private sector and the overall Nigerian economy through regular reviews of the business and economic climate by policy advocacy. The Nigerian economy in the first half of this year has been quite challenging due to the multiplicity of factors that are well known to most of us in the room. Although Nigeria's general elections held in March were considered relatively peaceful and transition completed in May, business conditions and operating environment in the first half of the year were largely difficult due to rising interest rates, inflationary pressures, foreign exchange volatility, and the liberalization of the downstream sector of the oil and gas industry. As a result, cost of living has significantly gone up. The first quarter GDP slowed to 2.3%, largely driven by growth in the oil sector, while the oil sector remained in recession. The country has also witnessed significant decline in foreign direct investments, coupled with high level of public debt stock, and concerns for debt sustainability, high unemployment, and poverty levels. The International Monetary Fund, in its July 2023 World Economic Outlook update, lowered its growth projection for Nigeria in 2023 to 3.2 from 3.3 in 2022, reflecting security issues in the oil sector, policy risks, and persistently high inflation that is also going higher as we speak. In order to address long-standing macroeconomic imbalances and change the economic trajectory, the new government led by President Tinubu introduced several reform policies, including fuel subsidy removal and the foreign exchange unification. Furthermore, to ease the effect on businesses, the poor and most vulnerable among us, several palliative measures were introduced. Today, LCCI has gathered a team of experts to extensively discuss these economic issues and implications for business and households, and its impact on the country's outlook. I therefore look forward to these conversations, the outcome of which will be documented and shared with our critical stakeholders in the Nigerian economy. I therefore urge us to make use of this opportunity by sharing our views and concerns about policy issues and developments. Once again, I would like to thank our guest speakers, panelists, distinguished guests for honoring this invitation. I wish everyone a successful participation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. We have a few persons for recognitions, a few more persons for recognitions. We have in our midst Princess Layo Okeowo. She's a council member and the chairman of the Printing, Publishing and Allied Group of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We also have in our midst the Honorary Life Vice President, Mr. Vegis, MFR. We have Mrs. Bamidele Daramola, FCA. She's the Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Yeah, thank you so much. And that was the Bishop Gabriel Idahosa has set the stage on. I would like to call on the representative of Cordros Capital and who are the main sponsors of today's event, Mr. Femi Ademola, to please come for the opening, your keynote address. Thank you.
The Deputy President, Bishop Gabriel Idahosa, FCA, the LCCI past president present here, the Vice President of the Chamber, Mr. Lcci and Madam Bamidele Daramola, Honorary Life President here, Mr. Vegis, other executive members of the chamber present here, the Director General of the LCCI, Dr. Chinyere Halmona, FCA, distinguished panelists and renowned economists present in our midst this morning, media executives and gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Cordros Capital, led by the Good Mind Director, Wale Agbenyogi, I am very pleased to be with you this morning at this year's LCCI Media Review and Outlook. I would like to start by commending the Council of the Chamber, led by the President, Asiwaju Dr. Michael Olawale Cole, and the entire executive members of the Chamber for putting this together. a very brilliant event at this very auspicious time when we are all trying to understand the global and domestic economic direction. Therefore, I am very delighted to see the representative of the private sector, the public sector, the media, and other critical stakeholders assembled here today. By sponsoring this event, Cordros Capital is very happy to associate with a great institution like the Chamber. It's the premier chamber in West Africa and a leading light in the continent. Cordros is very proud of the accomplishment and the resilience of the LCCI over the years. Unlike the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Cordros Capital too has grown over a period of time to become a very strong band with passion for consistent and sustainable growth. Today, Cordros Capital has evolved into a leading financial services group in Nigeria with service offerings in securities trading, investment banking, asset management, trustees, registrar, insurance brokerage, and investment research. At Cordros Capital, we walk our talk. We are very passionate about creating values for individuals, businesses, and financial institutions, corporate organizations, and government. We have therefore recorded significant successes in our different businesses that we are involved in. Over the years, our securities trading business, Cordros Securities Limited, has consistently maintained top 10 broker performance on the Nigerian Exchange Limited, NGX. Our asset management business too has grown to be one of the biggest in the industry, holding over 120 billion naira in assets under management. The investment banking division has participated in several landmark transactions in both public and private sector. In the public sector, Cordros has participated in transactions like the 115 billion Lagos State Bond, 28.2 billion Cross River State Bond, 25 billion Edo State Bond, 14.8 billion Ondo State Bond, and about 15 billion Kano State Bond, among other states that we work with. In the private sector, Cordros has been involved in transactions involving Dangote Cement PLC, raising commercial paper totaling about 120 billion in 2023. We worked with Fidelity Bank to raise 41.21 billion through a bond issuance in 2021. We worked with Geregu Power PLC to raise about 40 billion, CNI Leasing with about 10 billion, and we have arranged several fundraising instruments like commercial paper and bond for several other private companies, including FBN Quest Merchant Bank, Mekio Industries Limited, May and Baker PLC, Eternal PLC, Unicel Chemical, and many other corporate organizations in Nigeria. The company has also successfully executed M&A, merger and acquisition, and acted as financial advisors to several businesses, including Adova PLC, AG Leventis Nigeria Limited, 11 PLC, Value Alliance, PZ Cousins, etc. Our trust business, registrar, and insurance brokerage are also developing into strong players in their respective segments of the financial service sector. At Cordros, we are well positioned to address clients' financial needs and help them explore the present opportunities in the various sectors of the Nigerian economy. Now, back to where we are here today. According to the International Monetary Fund, the global economy is projected to grow by 3.0% this year, compared to 3.5% in 2022. What that means is that we are expecting a serious headwind globally this year. And as we have noted, this economy that we're talking about, the global economy, still remains very fragile, despite the fact that we have recovered from COVID-19 pandemic. The effect of Russian war in Ukraine is already being dealt with. But then we are, even in the West, we're having easing inflationary pressure. Monetary policy too, they are signaling that they might start to moderate in the next coming months. And then the banking sector seems to be improving in their health. But despite this, we are still expecting that the global economy will grow lower than what it was last year. While developed economies, including the United States, are projected to record sustainable growth, various emerging markets, including Nigeria, are struggling with more difficult financing conditions, high inflation, weak currency, declining reserves, declining household purchasing power, debt burden hangover and concerns, high and rising unemployment, rising income gaps, and poverty levels. However, despite the challenges, there are numerous opportunities for businesses and individuals. Hence, when we look at all these domestic economy, I personally am confident that with the quality and experience of the guest speaker and other distinguished panelists that we have here today, guests will leave this venue a lot richer than they came in. I'm optimistic that many of the views that will be expressed here today will be useful in adding to the bouquet of ideas that will help to solve some of the challenges that the nation's economy currently face and to identify new opportunities. Once again, I would like to thank the LCCI for organizing this media economic review and outlook. And we as Cordros will look forward to a further strengthening of the partnership that we have now established between the two organizations. I would also like to implore all of us here today to continue to work together for this country, for ourselves, to achieve desired result for our individual organizations and the nation's economy. I thank you all for listening. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Hello. Yeah. That was a very good one from the Group Executive Director, Cordros Capital. I mean, growing up was quite interesting for me. I love the English language. I really love that language. One of the first things I learned was adjectives. It expresses the relationship between two nouns, two pronouns, and things like that. It's during the course of his speech, what I heard was largest and biggest. And Cordros Capital represent an aspect of the financial services industry that is into proficiency, that is into, professionalism. My engagement with them, short as it is, was done professionally. What they promised, they delivered at the right time, and of course, at the right quantity. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Cordros Capital. Our guest speaker, Dr. Ayo Teriba, like they say often, needs not much introduction. But before we go there, before we call on him, I would like to call on the internal staff of LCCI. What makes an organization is not the building. It's not the beautiful building. It is not the swift, beautiful process. It is the manpower. LCCI has got some of the best staff in the industry and of course in Nigeria. The commitment we will see in staff, you will not believe it. For 135 years, this institution has been in existence, driving the course and the cost of the organized private sector. That's what LCCI is done in 135 years. These are a result of the effort of the staff. I would like to call on Kemi Shobayo. She's the Chief Financial Officer of this institution to help us with the profile of our guest speaker. A round of applause for Kemi Shobayo.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Standing on the existing protocols, it is with great pleasure that I'm here to introduce our guest speaker for the 2023 Media Economy Review and Outlook. Our speaker is the CEO of Economic Associate IHE. He provides strategic direction for ongoing research and consulting on the outlook of the Nigerian economy, focusing on global, continental, national, regional, states, and sector issues. He is also the coordinator of the Technical Working Group, TWG, on financial sector and capital markets on National Development Plan, MTNDP, 2021 to 2025, and MTNDP 2026 to 2030, and Nigeria Agenda 2050. He is the Vice President of the Technical Committee of the Nigerian Council on Privatization, aligning privatization programs with the microeconomy. He is a member of the Board of Economy Advisor in the Office of the Economy Advisor to the Vice President, contributing to the conception of economy policy ideas for the country. He is a member of Nigeria Industrial Council, shaping efforts to ensure Nigeria's industrial advancement before becoming the CEO of IHE in 2004. Dr. Hayo was Chief Economics at This Day newspaper in 2001-2004, faculty member of Lagos Business School from 1995 to 2001, the head of research at Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, 1993 to 1995, and company economist of USC of Nigeria in 1992 to 1993. He has also worked as consultant to many blue chip companies, federal ministry, department and agency, state governments, DFDD, USAID, UNIDO, World Bank, GIZ, and was a visiting scholar to the IMF Research Department in Washington, D.C. I have received grants from Ford Foundation and Rockefeller Foundation, chair the steering committee of Money, Microeconomics, and Finance Research Group of Money Market Association of Nigeria. He is a council member and chair of Economic and Statistic Committee of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, a non-executive director of ProShare, and was a non-executive director of Greenwich Trust Group. Ayo earned BSc Economics from University of Ibadan with Sir James Robson Prize and medal, USC Prize in Economics, and Economics Department Prize as all-round best economics graduate in 1988. MSc Economics from Ibadan in 1990. Mr. Field Economics and Developing Countries as a Cambridge DFID scholar at University of Cambridge in 1992. And PhD in Applied Economics and Monetary Economics from University of Durham in 2003. Is an alumni of Lagos Business School, AMP 5, and Early Business School, BDP Executive Program. I am pleased to welcome our guest speaker once again, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me to welcome Dr. Ayo Teriba. Please, can we keep clapping for him?
Just sit. Yeah. Sure. Just some other recognitions. We have in our midst Dr. Abayomi Ojekunle, representing the Director General, Nigerian Employers Consultative Assembly. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Let me tell this house a thing or two about Dr. Teriba. Dr. Teriba did his PhD at Durham University. I did my MSc in finance at Durham University. We left the same year. While he was doing his PhD viva, I was part of the crowd. And I was telling myself, what a brilliant Nigerian this man is. I hope one day he will serve Nigeria. And then I was so proud of him listening to his presentation that the guy standing beside me, I told him, you see this man? He's a Nigerian. I mean, the guy is British. Say, you see this man? He's a Nigerian. Me too, I'm a Nigerian. That said a lot about him. I thought he was brilliant then, quite brilliant. Over the years, like wine, Ayo has grown more brilliant. It's my pleasure to have him deliver his speech as the guest speaker of today's occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, one more round of applause for Dr. Ayo Teriba.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. The president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, deputy president, vice presidents present, members of council, members of the chamber, the DG, Lagos Chamber of Commerce, and the director of research, Tony. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my pleasure to be a part of this annual Lcci event that provides us the opportunity to have a media assessment of the outlook of the Nigerian economy. It's a very commendable initiative of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as it enables us to engage among one another and provide thought leadership to the country. This year is a very special one in that it is an election year. It is a year of transition. It's a year in which one regime, after spending 8 years, has handed over the reins of government to another, although they are from within the same party, with the clear indications that they are going to pursue radically different policies, which makes it more important for us as we are at the stage where the newly elected regime are taking their first steps. They're just about 11 weeks in the saddle. And what you say to them now could go a long way to influence what they do over the next 4 years. They have an initial term of 4 years. And a lot are springing onto the surface in those few 11 weeks that we need to put in context and grapple with. Unlike the previous years, when we hold this mid-year event, when you had the benefit of somebody from government, especially the then DG of the Budget Office of the Federation, Mr. Ben Akabueze, joining the session to update us on what's happening on the fiscal front. You know, how much revenue the government had been able to mobilize, how much had they spent, you know, how good is the fiscal situation looking, and the rest of that. we are not having that today. Because, as we know, the president is only about to form his cabinet. And so we'll have to make do with the signals we can glean from the outside in the absence of any concrete information about where the outgone regime left the economy. There's no information about, okay, we got into office and this is what we met. That's very important. So it's a very big omission compared with the vantage position that that sort of information had given us in previous years. So perhaps it's also important to call upon the government to endeavor to fill this gap. If we look as the country or the economy as the patient, and we look at the new government as the medical crew, it's important that they start with a diagnosis. I know that a lot was said by all the political parties, all the presidential aspirants when they were campaigning about the situation in government and what they were going to do to make a difference. We hosted at least 2 of the parties here at the chamber last year. But the things they were saying were their perception from outside the government. Not any better than our own perception, because we were both outside the government. So now that the regime is inside the government, it will help for them to release a publication that is just purely diagnostic. And so we can have a focused conversation on how to solve the problems. However, since the regime came into office, we've seen right from the inauguration ground, the president, told us that the subsidy was gone. And of course, the subsidy had been gone. 2 weeks later, we unified the exchange rate. I'm hinting that those prescriptions were made, those pronouncements were made, those course of treatment were embarked upon without any rigorous diagnosis. The president could not have been aware of the situation in the downstream sector of the sector so at the inauguration ground. So no preparation was made to deal with the fallouts from the policies that had been announced. If you want to do a surgery, however minor, you need to assess what that surgery will entail. You may want to pull out a tooth. You have to consider, do I need some painkillers to administer as I pull out the tooth? And in some surgeries, if there is risk of loss of blood, do I need to stock up the blood bank and make sure that the remedy doesn't turn out to be worse than the disease? We didn't do any of that. There wasn't any engagement. Okay, so we removed subsidy. And of course, we've unified the exchange rate. And the patient is really in pain, is bleeding, and the blood bank is empty. Okay, no painkiller. And we spent 8 weeks debating what the painkiller should be, how should it be administered, and the rest of it. So it's lessons, vital lessons for our country. It's our experience would have been better if we did not have to do real world experiments. If we did experiments in a cultured environment and we could predict outcomes and consequences and minimize the pains to the populace, to Nigerians. That's why, even at the heat of the COVID crisis, where there were no pharmaceutical remedies, when the initial vaccines came out, they didn't rush to administer them. They had to do trials and be sure that they knew what the likely consequences were and they knew how to mitigate them. So it's not too late. So my first point was the government should please lead a process of us establishing the situation of the economy as they met it or as they are now. Number two, we should spend some time in debating how best to carry out reforms and identify in particular the fallout from reforms. The reason you do reforms is that they're going to have benefits to the country. So presumably there will be gainers, all of us will gain, but there would also be losers. I apologize, let me just put this. There will be losers, so you can identify the gainers and the losers and measure the extent of likely losses and make provision upfront for mitigating losses. Now, if I would just begin, therefore, by the lessons I thought I have learned from the events of the last 3 months. It's that while the president is well-meaning in removing the petroleum subsidy, I thought the consensus of majority of the elite was that subsidies should go. It was wasteful, it was corrupt, and the rest of it. What we hadn't paid too much attention to debate was how exactly do you go about doing it? And so I want to take the benefit of the hindsight that we now have to suggest some steps that we missed that would have made for a better experience. Second one is that we are all agreed that the exchange rate should be unified, because it was not only wasteful, government was losing money by giving forex to a privileged few at subsidized rates. And some of those privileged few would turn around and round trip the forex to the parallel market. So it was corrupt, it was wasteful, it was unfair. And I thought that the balance of the elite consensus was that it should go. But we did not debate how to go about letting it go. So the lesson, to my mind, is when you do price reform, the idea is that you want price to clear the market by equating supply with demand. Now, it is important, therefore, before you free the price, to ensure that the market is competitive, that there will be freedom of entry by suppliers. Because if you free the price and there is no competition, the monopoly will merely continue to exploit the public. Whether you are talking about downstream petroleum sector or you are talking about the foreign exchange market. And prior, in the regime in which subsidies festered and in which multiple exchange rates festered, you had monopolies. or oligopolies. You know, you either have a major supplier or you had a few suppliers who had market powers and exploited their market powers. So for a successful reform of the downstream sector, you needed to break monopoly powers and ensure that now that prices are becoming cost reflective, suppliers can easily enter to compete with the incumbents. And that's the only way, as you liberalize price, the price might come down. Because if you have a bigger supply response than the demand response, then price will come down. We saw it in telecoms. Originally, when you had just two dominant players, only three were licensed. It was then Econet, MTN, and MTEL. MTEL, sorry? I thought it became MTEL. And MTEL was it died in infancy. You know, they talk about infant mortality. So you are left with two. You are left with a duopoly in which they exploited their market power. You remember how much you paid to buy a SIM card. Some people in this room will be shocked that there was a time that you paid for SIM price. SIM cards are free now. So when you want to get your phone, and of course, most Nigerians are doing so for the first time with the GSM, you pay for handset, you pay for SIM card, and then you now start a conversation about recharge, paying for airtime. And those didn't come cheap at the time as well. So you're talking of thousands of outlay. And when you paid for your airtime, they did per minute billing. So if you pick the call and you spent 5 seconds, they will charge you for 60 seconds. Talk of exploitation of market power. But when Glo came into the fray, and all attempts to get them to do per second billing failed, they said, no, it involves a lot of complicated infrastructure, blah, blah. When Glo came and did per second billing, in a matter of weeks, all of the two incumbents also did what? Per second billing. It became possible because a competitor has done it. And they started competing among themselves until people started getting free SIM cards, free calls, and another 9mobile was also to join them to stabilize the market. So it was competition that helped the consumers to benefit, you know, from the reforms in the telecom sector. And I do not see that competition happening in the downstream of the petroleum sector, where you have the NNPC being a virtual monopolist. NNPC plays upstream in exploration and production, plays midstream. All the 4 refineries that Nigeria currently has are operated by NNPC, and they don't work. And that is what is causing problems downstream. And the same NNPC that doesn't refine any of our crude has a dominant grip downstream. It has the largest number of distribution outlets, and it was the one that was sending out price templates after the subsidy was removed. I think it's important for us to call upon our president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to do something about breaking the monopoly power of the NNPC. My suggestion is that you should unbundle NNPC. You should separate the upstream exploration and production operations, from the midstream refinery operation. I don't even think that the refineries have a board of their own. And also separate the downstream operation, put them under the oversight of functionally separate entities. Even if NNPC remains a group, let them have their own boards, let them be accountable. And it's no comfort that the same NNPC now has shares in the Dangote refineries. So if you want Nigeria, I mean, we've inflicted pains on ourselves by removing the subsidy. And we are told that there will be a reward. You know, you bear the pain for a while and there will be a reward. There will be no reward if you don't break monopoly paths. There can only be a reward if you break monopoly paths. NNPC is too opaque for comfort. It's too unaccountable. If they were accountable, the refineries would work. They don't work and it doesn't matter. And I'm not at all comforted by the fact that they are also now, they have a share, you know, in Dangote refineries, and we are beginning to hear about crude swap and the rest of that. So the earlier we fragment, you know, that organization. So adjusting price without institutional reform is not going to get us far. And the same situation applies to the unification of the exchange rates. It is the same Central Bank of Nigeria that over the past 9 years has superintended over the emergence and the widening of the premium that you are entrusting with the reform. It wasn't like that before 2014. Margins were small. Until 2014, it was 2015 that this crisis started. And if NNPC is opaque, the Central Bank of Nigeria is even more opaque. There's no transparency. So if you want us to benefit from the reform of the foreign exchange market, you need to do institutional reforms that will ensure transparency. Institutional reforms that will ensure competition. One of the problems with the central bank and its operation in the foreign exchange market since 2015 was a tendency to favor banks over other players in the foreign exchange market. They hounded the Bureau de change, and there are others, fintechs in the payment scheme, handling foreign exchange as well. Because they said, go to the banks. Don't go to Bureau de change. And I still had the acting governor of the central bank referring to a parallel market, saying that remittances go to a parallel market. What's a parallel market? Why are BDCs parallel market? BDCs are not parallel markets. Some people even say black market. They're not black markets. BDCs were created by government policy and licensed by the Central Bank of Nigeria. What makes them parallel? They are official. You can choose to have different windows in the official market, but they are very, very official. And there's no reason why you should refuse to supply them forex. And that's part of the abuse of market power. And I would dare say that that abuse is arbitrary. If your laws, if the Central Bank Act allows you to license an operative, I think you will be contravening the same law by preventing that operative to discharge the functions that you have licensed them to play. We were not the first country. We copied the borrow the change model from abroad. In many countries, you get to post offices, you buy forex there. They are not hounded. They are meant to handle the retail. So please, let's zoom in and make sure that the CBN does not continue to infringe on the rights of those companies that it has licensed. I don't know if anybody, this doesn't affect states, the states were kind enough to take the central bank to the Supreme Court when they were showing the same autocratic tendencies in the currency design saga, in which you ask people to bring their money for exchange and they surrender, they deposited their money and you will let them withdraw their money. And you started telling them you don't need more than 20,000 a day. And they couldn't even get 10,000. People were sleeping in banks. So the character of that institution that you are entrusting the fate of Nigerians to in this unification of the exchange is questionable. And let's face the fact, you can't do economic reforms with the respect of organizations. I thought that it's not only the NNPC that needs to be reorganized, Central Bank of Nigeria should be reorganized. And we should follow the example of the Labour government when they took over in England in 1997. They reconstituted, they fragmented the functions of the Bank of England. They withdrew banking supervision from them and revised the act. And that revised act says that on the day that this act comes into force, the day that this act becomes law, the board of the Bank of England starts dissolved. You can't just say, remove or suspend the governor and leave all his co-travelers of 9 years and expect to get a better outcome. So if the president loves Nigeria, he has to do something about reining in the Senate. And he has also said it. He has said that there are, there's a rot in the monetary process. So what are we waiting for? So any delay in doing those reorganizations will inflict pains on Nigerians. So banks' license obliges them to mobilize deposits. BDCs can't mobilize deposits. Banks' license obliges them, it gives them a lot of advantages. It is the only thing that the BDC license, authorizes them to is trade forex. And why will you now marginalize them and load the advantage further in favor of banks? So I thought that those two points were quite important. Had we thought about this, had we had the benefit of a debate, before the reforms were done, I thought that maybe we would have done it differently and maybe we would have got a different outcome. I hope my presentation is up there. I'm speaking, if you like, from the presentation, but if it's put up there, it'd be nice for all of us to, be on the same page at the same time. So we should be glad for a peaceful political transition. And matters are still in court. And however the court decides, 2023 elections had come in spite of fears that it might be protracted and might not be peaceful. It has been peaceful, it has been decisive. And the umpire had declared a winner. The winner has gone on to start, taking decisions that affect all our lives. And the umpire is being challenged in court. Whoever wins in court, that does not remove the fact that the process has been peaceful. And while, until further notice, we should say that some positives, that we took out of the transition is that for the first time, you have some harmony in government that you didn't have for 24 years. And the first time you have a political leader, a party man as president. And you could see harmony between the party, the parliament, and the president. It's very important for progress. Unlike, the experiences we had in some of the years where the president is always at loggerheads with the parliament, the president removes speaker after speaker, removes senate president after senate president. So political stability should make for more progress. Let's hope that that stability will not be abused. That internal harmony will not be abused, and we'll see some progress. A major gap, in what the government has been saying and doing, we have been picking problems to solve on a case-by-case basis. We've paid attention to subsidy, we've paid attention to the foreign exchange market. We're talking about an emergency on food security, and there are debates about what's missing is some holistic economic reform program. So you have these isolated dots, but it's important that we try to connect the dots. As you can see, isolated policies like subsidy removal have systemic ramifications. Isolated policies like, unification of vision have systemic ramifications. And my key issue, one of the problems in the foreign exchange reform that has seen the Naira, weaken perpetually since the reform was done is how adequate are our reserves level. And it seems obvious to everybody that our reserve levels are inadequate. And it's not clear when we are going to start the conversation about how we can get adequate reserve levels. And when we were giving the example of surgery and the blood bank, this is where it is, most relevant. That most countries would make an effort to shore up reserves before they float their currency. We have neglected to do that thus far. How soon can we do that? And that connects with some of the pre-election headaches that we have had around the fiscal crisis, in which the previous regime had funded itself primarily by borrowing. Revenues had been declining, and they had borrowed to the point that the debt costs, annual debt costs, were now higher than the revenue. So it's not clear what the new regime is doing about. That's why I said we should have started with a holistic diagnosis, and we would have taken the problems one by one. And that would have given us the privilege of sequencing the solution, of identifying not what needs to be done, but what needs to be done before the other, because it matters. And it's not too late, for the government to come up, with the diagnosis and the holistic reform package. I will be picking on a few issues that are critical to the outlook in closing. And sectoral reform. We have the summary of the point that we made about the downstream petroleum sector and the foreign exchange market is that you need to liberalize those sectors and make entry to supply in those sectors easier. And that was what worked in the telecom sector. And there are other sectors of the economy that need liberalization, where there is a dominant government agency, but that dominant government agency is not delivering on the exercise of its political power. And so I will want to add to that list government's real estate portfolio. We have a lot of wealth buried in the real estate sector, the public real estate portfolio, but they are idle, they are unexploited. And it's time we did what we did to the pension sector, to the real estate sector. And the model here is the United States government. They did exactly what we did with our pension sector to their real estate sector. They call it, government real estate portfolio. And they, licensed auctioneers and valuers to establish the market values of the real estate owned by the United States government, federal and state. I've seen a spreadsheet with about 5,000 such property spread over the UK. And then they license developers. So the auctioneers will establish value, the developers will bid for the right to repurpose and redevelop, and then the licensed facility managers. And those facility managers will be the ones to run, the Nigeria needs to convert its real estate wealth to liquidity. You can't have so much debt and have so much wealth in real estate and still be languishing in debt. It's not just real estate. Government companies we need to know their market values. Like Saudi knows now they are at the market value of Aramco. 5 years ago, they didn't know. And it's a lot of comfort to them that when they did the IPO, they found that Aramco was worth 1.7 trillion US dollars. Today, it's worth 2.1 trillion. At some points earlier in the year, it has gone to 2.3 trillion. And it's comforting to them. Their financial narratives, that has transformed their financial narratives, because their GDP is 850 billion. So if they were pulling all the weight on GDP like we are doing, they'll be perpetually poor. So you now have one company that is like twice or thrice bigger than your GDP. You gain $400 billion in capital gains since you listed it. So what are we waiting for? We were going to list the NNPC, so why not? And we list NNPC, unbundle it, list it, and all the subsidiaries. If you could list LNG, list it. It makes a difference to our balance sheet, and it reduces the noise over our debt. We only owe about 100 billion US dollars. We probably have assets in real estate and corporate sector in excess of $1 trillion. And the sooner we try to start moving in that direction, the better. Especially since the Buhari regime established the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, they reconstituted it before they left. I think that the Tinubu regime should run with it, and let's MOFI begin to establish market values of those assets and begin to see how we can unlock liquidity from them, how we can be using them to raise equity. Because this story of government always borrowing but never issuing equity is part of the reason for the fiscal crisis. There's no country in the world that is doing well that is not contracting more equity than it is contracting debt. And when you have a Nigeria that never touches equity at home and abroad, we have a vibrant stock market. All the equities on our stock market are private. The only space where the government places in the debt market, whether money market or bond market, we only issue debt. We go to Europe, we only do Euro bonds. Saudi doesn't do Euro bonds. Saudi does sukuk. And by the way, sukuks are equity or convertible to equity. So the sooner we move in that direction, the better. And I dare say that MOFI warehouses all the investments of the country. And they, by their new charter, they are responsible for ensuring adequate corporate governance in those agencies. And I dare say that the assets on which MOFI should have oversight includes both NNPC and Central Bank of Nigeria. The Bank of England will declare gleefully on their website that they are owned 100% by the Treasury, and that 100% of the proceeds of currency issues are transferred to the Treasury, and that 100% of their profit are transferred to the Treasury. Here, the Central Bank of Nigeria carries on as if it owns itself, and there's nobody who is, exercising governance. It's not the National Assembly. In the UK, it's the Treasury that the Central Bank must clear with. What should we do? The Treasury Secretary is the member of the Parliament. And we need, with this MOFI regime, we need to go back to that. Let MOFI superintend over all the financial investments of the federal government, wherever they are located. And I think I have just about 2 more points. MPR CRR. I have just 2 more points. This MPR CRR, and then the currency redesign, with the Supreme Court has delayed until December 2023. For the MPR and CRR, I see that there are a lot of superficial conversations and some misleading suggestions. MPR is now at 19.5%. That's monetary policy rate. And CRR is at 32.5%. Both are strangleholds on the economy. There are strangleholds on businesses, there are strangleholds on consumers who need liquidity and have been denied liquidity. And I had occasion last Thursday to remind the resident representative of the IMF, who was asking for more tightening. He thought that 19% monetary policy rate was not tight enough, and that the 2.5% CRR wasn't tight enough. And I reminded him that the monetary policy process, not just the foreign exchange process that lacks transparency, this monetary policy process lacks transparency as well. They have made this journey to 19% combined with 32.5%. It has never, none of the two rates have ever been that high in the history of the country. And the central bank, the monetary policy, had made that journey, telling us they are trying to control liquidity, adding half a percentage point, 1/4 of the percentage point at meetings. But behind our back, they were releasing 22 trillion naira in ways and means advances to the government. So now that we know that you were doing that when we weren't looking. My question is, to what extent is this stranglehold with MPC and on the MPR and the CRR, or just compensating for the crime that you have committed? Is unlawful. So with the same CBN, same board, same monetary policy committee, IMF is asking for more tightening. I said, demand transparency. Let's know the fiscal situation first. And let's know what's the state of play with that. You can't be heaping more hardship on businesses and depressing growth when you are opening the pump with ways and means. So it's not clear where the new government is getting the money. You know, they are announcing to release, to, you know, this, to that. I hope it's revenue. I hope it's not ways and means advances. And until we get clarity on the ways and means advances, please do not ask for further tightening of the monetary policy. There's no country in the world that does price interest rate tightening and quantitative pricing at the same time. It's usually one or the other. The reason why central banks around the world were doing quantitative easing was that they had cut interest rates to zero. They couldn't cut interest rates anymore, so they did quantitative easing. Nigeria never does quantitative easing. We've, you know, since they started raising rates, like within a year ago, we jump ahead of them and raise rates more than them. Whereas for 10 years, they didn't raise rates at all. They were starting from 0 or 0.5. We were starting from, was it 14%, and we have not jumped to 19.5. They don't have CRR. CRR is 0 across most countries in the world now. We have 32% CRR, and we are trying to outdo the people who are tightening interest rates. If once we get clarity on the state of the ways and means and how to resolve it, my suggestion is not to borrow like the Buhari regime was, you know, proposing, is to issue equity on the assets I've mentioned, you know, real estate, corporate assets, and also infrastructure. Infrastructure as a issue concessions and take that 22 trillion out. Equity is the only way in which you can raise 100 billion, and it's not going to hurt your economy. India and Brazil are getting 40 billion annually in FDI. So why not us? Dubai got 22 billion last year. We got a net outflow. So pay attention to that. And the way to attract FDI is not to talk about it. It's not to travel abroad to meet investors. It's not to invite investors. It's to list projects that can be funded. When you list projects, funds come. When we listed Lcci, the funding came. When we listed the GSM telephony, the funding came. So start listing your companies, start listing your real estate, start listing your infrastructure assets, and the money will come. And once you take that off the books of the central bank and you get a critical minimum level of reserves, I will demolish the CRR and the MPR stranglehold. I'll move it back to the region of where somebody like Professor Soludo left it. He left CRR at 1%. And I thought the policy rate was also close to single digits at the time. Finally, I want to close on the currency redesign. The Supreme Court has restrained the outgone president and the central bank to allow the 200 naira, the 500 naira, and the 1,000 naira to circulate, the old notes to circulate on the December. Now, December is only 3 months away. How prepared are we? Are those notes going to be demonetized in December? And if they are demonetized, are we just repainting them and bringing the same denominations back? We should be having that conversation now. We don't have to wait till December. Because as we saw, there was a limit to what you can do in 3 months if you want to replace notes. But I have suggestions for us. And it's on that note that I would like to close. Is that I want to wake us up to the fact that with the current exchange rate of the Naira, what's the latest figure, please, Dr. Okiti? Sorry? 950. So if the Naira, you need 950 Naira to exchange with $1. With $1. And you already need more than 1,000 Naira to exchange with £1. Nigeria's largest denomination note is 1,000 Naira. Is equivalent to $1. It's less than £1. Is that what you want to continue with? Is that what you want to repaint? I dare say, no other country in the world has committed that error of omission. Currency notes are designed primarily for retail transactions. And by the time when you have your currency notes, the highest denomination is more or less needed for every retail transaction. For you to fill your car now, you need 50 units of 1,000 Naira notes, or 100 units of 500. The paper you print the money on costs money. Which of you now, we want to pay somebody 50,000 Naira and we write 50 checks? That's exactly what the central bank is doing. The General Obasanjo regime corrected that problem by introducing, when it came, 50 Naira was the highest denomination note. And, he agreed to do 100, 200, 500, 1,000 between 1999 and 2005. That has been 20 years. And the exchange rate has eroded all that away. By the way, you have 10 billion pieces of those notes circulating, which is wasteful. So as the Supreme Court deadline approaches, I'm asking Nigerians, I'm asking the president, as we see, from the Supreme Court, only the president has the authority to direct the central bank to redenominate the currency. That the President Tinubu should kindly direct that larger denomination notes be introduced into circulation. And the face values should be large enough for you to have one note that you can drop at the filling station and pay for fuel. I do not know any other country in the world, particularly in the civilized world, where you will not be able to fill your tank with a piece of currency note. So I'm not saying, if you look at Euro area, which is the newest, currency, you can learn how they did it. When it started, the highest denomination note was 500 euros. They phased it out now because they found that it's not reasonable before you find any retail transaction you want to do with 500 euro notes. But that's if the 100 euro notes still are relevant to some transactions. I'm not saying we should go to 100 euro or $100. But I'm suggesting that, a currency equivalent to $50 is not out of place. So let's have 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20, and 50. And what should you do with the current 1,000 Naira notes and below? Go to England, go to Euro, €1 is a coin. £1 is a coin. £2, a coin. So 1,000 and below, coin them and save us from the time wasting, counting and counting and counting. You know, central bank, banks buying counting machine, banks having counting, and make the Nigerian currency system more efficient. I thank you very much.
One more round of applause for Dr. Tariba. Dr. Tariba is one of the men because of whom I'm proud to be called a Nigerian. Thank you, Dr. Tariba. Yeah. Before I go on, I'd like to recognize the presence of Mrs. M.F. Sonny. She is the CEO of Mulifelong Motor and one of the women leaders in the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Could you please stand up for recognition? We also have in our midst a friend. He is Dr. Augustine Agugwa. He is of the Department of Sociology, University of Lagos. Dr. Agugwa, please stand up for recognition. Yeah, back to Dr. Tariba's lecture. He made several suggestions. I'm going to try and recap them. It's not easy tracking him, but I tried my best. Dr. Tariba is of the view that if we have to understand that reform in the country should benefit more. Essentially, that's what economics actually propagate. And also economic policies emphasize the presence of more gainers than losers. More importantly, economists will say, so long as one person gains from this policy and nobody loses, that is some of the best economic policy. He's an advocate of a price reform. But in the sense that this price reform must be able to clear the market. When economists say clear the market, they mean at the point at which supply equates with demand. He's also of the opinion that we should allow for competition in the marketplace because it also helps the consumer. The final beneficiary of competition is the consumer. He is not an advocate of monopoly power, using elaborately the example of the NMPC. He wants institutional reform to take place. This would also help price stability. And then he is an advocate of systemic transparency for Naira to stabilize. He brought to the fore the need to create a level playing field for deposit money banks, that is financial banks as we know them, and of course, the Bureau de Change. They are not Bureau de Change, they are not BDCs, they are not illegal markets. They are creation of the Central Bank of Nigeria. It also calls for reorganization of the Apex Monetary Policy Authority. In this sense, I'm referring to the Central Bank of Nigeria. Don't take the governor of the Central Bank away. Take his co-travelers along with you. The present regime is of the, Dr. Tariba is also of the view that the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, as that idea, it's a very strong one and should not be jettisoned by the present regime. He is of the view that the government must and should play beyond the debt market when you have a lot of value on the equity side. Let me just recall some things again. Dr. Teriba had his PhD at Durham University. As of 2003, Durham University in the UK was the best finance school in Europe. So he is qualified to talk on money issues and monetary policy in the country. Dr. Teriba would like to see clarity from the monetary authority with regards to ways and means so as to stabilize the interest rate market. He would not advocate for unnecessary roadshows across capital cities in the US or in the Eurozone area or even in the UK. Rather, he would like to see a listing of viable projects, and then FDI, foreign direct investment, will come running to the shore. I think before now, a lot of us haven't really thought about the fact that the highest denomination of Nigeria, that's 1,000 Naira, is just $1. He's bringing that to our attention. He brought that to our attention. He wants to see the government create larger denomination to make the monetary system more efficient. Dr. Teriba, once again, thank you so much. Before we go on to our panelist session, I'd like to tell you that we have a team of about 3 panelists to discuss issues that Dr. Teriba raised in his submissions. Chinwe Egwim, she is unable to attend in person, but she's online waiting. She is the chief economist of Coronation Merchant Bank. We also have Dr. Afolabi Olowokere, who is the MD, chief economist, analyst data services and resources. He's also online. I have my friend, Dr. Oho Okiti, who is the CEO, Think Business Africa, in our midst. Could you please come over? Yeah. I'm calling on Eze Okorafor to give us a recitation of his profile. No, don't worry.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols duly observed, as I also consider it a privilege to introduce one of the panelists here present in the person of Dr. Ogo Okiti, CEO, Think Business Africa. Dr. Ogo Okiti is the CEO, Think Business Africa. He was the managing director of Business Day, Nigeria's premier business content provider, between January 2020 and May 2023. He was the first chief economist and chair editorial board of the same institution, 2007 and 2011. He's an economist, strategic and policy thinker. He speaks on economics, Business, and Communications. Dr. Lcci served in the presidency as a special assistant to the chief economic advisor to the president. In addition, he coordinated the office secretariat of Nigeria's hosting of the World Bank of the World Economic Forum, WEF, on Africa in 2014. As CEO of the Time Economics between 2015 and 2019, an economic consulting firm based in Abuja and focused on research, strategy, and markets. He facilitated the Time Economics monthly breakfast meeting, which held every first Wednesday at Transcorp Hilton Hotel in Abuja. He received his PhD from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom and graduated from the Ambrose Oli University, Ekpoma, Nigeria. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please join me as I welcome Dr. Lcci to the podium. Please, a round of applause, please.
Yeah, thank you, Izzy. I will call on Edo Rehi Ekong to help with the recitation of the profile of Dr. Afolabi Olowokere.
Thank you very much. Dr. Afolabi Olowokere, MD, Chief Economist, Analyst, Data Sciences and Resources. Afolabi Emmanuel Olowokere is the Managing Director and Chief Economist of Analyst Data Services and Resources, ADSR. Before now, he was at different times the head of Economic Research and Policy Management at the Securities and Exchange Commission, Nigeria, a research economist at the World Bank, the head of Economic Research and Publications at Financial Derivatives Company, FDC, and a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Econometrics and Allied Research, CAR, University of Ibadan. Afolabi holds a doctoral degree in economics from the University of Ibadan under the African Economic Research Consortium's sponsored collaborative PhD program, CPP, in Sub-Saharan Africa. He also teaches at the Central Bank of Nigeria's collaborative postgraduate program in the Department of Economics, University of Ibadan, in addition to being a senior faculty member at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG. Dr. Olowokere is an associate of the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers, a member of the research committee of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, CIBN, and a member of the Productive Capacities Index, PCI, Statistical and Technical Task Team of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. He has served in the drafting and macroeconomic modeling groups that worked on the National Development Plans 2021 to 2025 and Nigerian Agenda 2050. Afolabi has published widely in his field with experience working and consulting for various international and local institutions in the area of economics, finance, and data modeling. Please welcome with me Dr. Afolabi Olowokere.
Yeah, thank you, ID. Dr. Danjima Iyaji would recite that of the panelist, who is also the chief economist at Coronation Merchant Bank, Ms. Chinwe Egwim.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Standing on the existing protocols, I'm here to read and recite the profile of Ms. Chinwe Egwim, She is a renowned economist with over 700 published economic notes under her belts. She is also currently the chief economist and the head of economic research and intelligence at Coronation Merchant Bank. She has worked at a reputable organization within the financial services industry, which include the FBN Quest Merchant Bank, FBN Capital, Fintech Rating, Milan, and Central Bank of Nigeria. She was appointed as a national consultant by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa to lead the service trade project partly driven by UTAD. Through this project, she has successfully led the UNAC National Seminar on Global and Regional Value Chain Analysis for the financial service sector, as well as produce a policy document on the back of extensive data analysis, which is served as auxiliary resource for the African Continental Free Trade Area agreements. Her contribution have also supported the high-level committees set up by development agencies like the World Bank. She has been included to IMF Article 4 consultations, African Development Bank meetings, and as a board committee member on research at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. She has served as resident economist for the research-based initiative, African Investment Roundtable. She has equally been appointed to serve on advisory boards and also provides guidance to select board committees. She's frequently pulled in to give expert advice on economic trends across print media, also on news channels such as CBC, CBNC, Africa, BBC, among others. Her article on African Continental Free Trade and Women was published by the World Economic Forum. She was appointed as the Executive Council member of Women in Management, Business, and Public Sector, and she is the current vice chair of advocacy on that committee, that's WIPSIM. She was also elected as executive at Professional Women Bankers, an arm of the prestigious Chartered Institute of Bankers, Nigeria. She has authored a book titled Understanding Economic Jargon, which is ranked as the bestseller in education leadership on Amazon. And she has received several reputable recognitions and awards. She has a master's in financial economics from Kingston University, London, management from the European School of Economics, BA in economics from Kwame Nkrumah University, Kumasi, Ghana, project management from Event Academy, and is an alumni of European School of Economics. So I stand to present this great woman to this audience. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Yaji. So we go into our panelist session. We will first of all ask the panelists to give us an overview of the economy in the half year, which they just have about 5 minutes per panel. And thereafter we'll continue with the discussions on Dr. Teriba's submissions. Thank you. We will start with those online. Dr. Afolabi, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Dr. Afolabi, you've heard what Dr. Teriba has got to say with on the economy in the previous half year. What are your views about the events in the economy? I mean, we all realize that there was a change of government in the half year, and we have seen monetary policies taking different shape. What are your first views, please? Thank you.
Okay. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. And I stand on the existing protocol. And I would also like to congratulate Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry for this opportunity, as well as this program that is well organized. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure listening to Dr. Ayoteriba. Most of the things, he actually went philosophical. Not only was he trying to tell us where we are, but he was also trying to tell us how we got here and how we can implement certain structural reforms or structural change issues that can take us for the rest of the year and even beyond, because it's not just enough to say what will happen in the next 6 months or 4 or 5 months, but we are more interested in things that are more sustainable. And I think for most of the things he has said, one cannot agree less with him on those issues. So thanks for those very nice presentations, Dr. Teriba. On the economy, a number of things we've seen. We've seen what is happening to growth. We know growth is still relatively weak, and most likely will continue to be weak, especially when the data for the second quarter will come out. Inflation, we've seen that rising. At 24.8%, close to 25%, which is the highest in 18 years, 3 months for the country. The last time we had that was around September 2005. So we are back to those periods. We've seen exchange rate divergence. What happened in April 2017 when the IIE window was introduced, where we had a convergence between the official, Dr. Teba said we should not say official and parallel, where we had convergence between the IIE window rates and let's say the BDC rates. We have not seen the same thing now. There was this expectation that once we do the devaluation, because we probably may call it correction or normalization, whatever we call it, there was this expectation that once you do it, the other rates may converge. But I think what we are also learning now is that times are different. We may have to look at the issues around the economy before we start implementing policies. And we don't just have to assume that things will work the way we want them to work. We must have good knowledge and talk to experts on the economy before we start doing some of the policies. Otherwise, we may not see what we want. We know that production base is still weak. Manufacturing sector contribution to GDP will only be around between 10 to 13%, depending on
No, it's just online missing, I think. Dr. Falabi, can you hear me? So could you just hold on a bit for him? Or can I call on Miss Chinwe Egwim?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you quite clearly. Good afternoon. Chinwe, thank you for your readiness to accept us at very short notice. Could you tell us your submissions on what has happened in the economy in the previous half year? Or like to know that before we go into further discussion on Dr. Teriba's view. Thank you, Chinwe.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I think what would provide value would be for me to give you a forward-thinking view as opposed to discussing what has happened in the past half year, because Dr. Teriba did a really good job in walking us through the numbers for the first half of this year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select specific economic indicators and just give a snapshot of our views on these indicators. And I think I'm going to start with inflation. Now, our current projection is obviously considerably higher than 20%. We got the latest inflation figures come out yesterday, and it hits about 24% for July. Now, what one would usually see is a slight moderation in the month-on-month inflation during harvest months, which of course falls within the third quarter of the year. And of course, there's usually a seasonal spike in this same month-on-month inflation in December due to India festivities. But the factors such as effects of the PMS subsidy removal, and of course, the FX liberalization that has taken place may result, or may be too optimistic, will result in a minimal positive impact that could come from these harvest months. And so right now, having to revise our base case scenario numbers, inflation is now, or our projection for inflation is now as high as 27.6% India. What did we look at? Transmission effect of cost push inflation, which is visible in domestic prices. And that is still weighing so heavy on business expenses as well as household wallets. Of course, structural issues that we've been talking about for years. Hopefully the new administration will pay close attention to this and tackle these issues. So issues such as insecurity, logistics, energy supply, etc. Now, the further spike that came more recent, about 26% spike on the PMS pump price was also considered. Of course, exchange rate depreciation that we've seen over the past weeks, and spikes in production costs, especially for imported inputs. So we're dealing with not just FX depreciation, we're also dealing with high inflation in advanced economies. And a country like Nigeria is import dependent or heavy on imports. And so it's a double whammy that's going on. Now, moving on to the policy rate, the MPR, which I did mention in his presentation. Now, in my view, monetary policy alone is not sufficient to tame high inflation. Inflationary pressure in Nigeria is really due to a blend of cost push, or what we call supply side, and then there's demand pull inflation as well. Now, a hand-in-glove approach is required between the monetary and the fiscal authorities if we're going to see sustainable solutions to bringing down inflation figures. There are challenges that cannot be tackled just using a lopsided approach. I mentioned earlier structural issues. They need to be addressed. Now, if the general posture has been that of inflation targeting, then an expectation of another rate hike if the MPC meets next month is not far-fetched, because inflation figures, the latest just came out, an uptick was registered. Projections, I'm sure not just my projections or projections from Coronation Merchant Bank, but projections across different institutions point towards upticks in subsequent months of this year. And so if the posture has been that of inflation targeting, then another policy rate hike is not far-fetched. If we look at central banks across different economies, the Federal Open Market Committee for the US, the ECB for the Eurozone, and then the Bank of England for the UK, policy rate hike posture still remains. However, we have seen that the degree at which these hikes are taking place are softening. So these that I mentioned, their recent rate hikes were about 25 basis points across board. So, and again, that is what we saw with Nigeria's MPC at its last meeting. I do acknowledge that each country has their peculiar economic challenges, and so the right economic tools should be tailored towards addressing issues. These policy rate hikes, what do? They signal that lending rates as well as yields on fixed income instruments are likely to trend up. And of course, this would reflect borrowing costs. However, the transmission mechanism is usually very slow. So looking ahead, in our opinion, loan growth in the industry, it could slow due to concerns around potential rates in non-performing loans. Now, for the average Nigerian, consumption patterns could be affected as well. You have high inflation, you have borrowing costs trending up as well. That, of course, that's going to erode purchasing power to an extent. Now, select businesses may consider passing on these increased costs to consumers on the back of, increased borrowing, as I've said, elevated inflation, as I've said, especially consumer goods companies. Now, let me move on to FX. I'm trying my best to stay within your 5 minutes timeline. For exchange rate, it really is a case of demand and supply dynamics. Some may argue that a fragment of specific income classes may be unable to purchase as much dollars given the FX liberalization. So given that it takes so much more naira to purchase the volume of dollars that one would have been able to purchase, let's say, 2 to 3 years ago. So some may have that argument. However, that might not be sufficient to drive down FX demand significantly. In my opinion, if current liquidity constraints are not resolved in the near term, I see exchange rates at elevated levels this year. Now, there are different FX liquidity sources, and I don't have enough time to list all of them. But from my vantage point, supply seems muted across board. The FPI inflows, remittance, non-oil receipts from non-oil exports, all production levels against the pricing that we're seeing in the global oil market. So it's quite a number to list, but I don't have the time to list all of them. I've just listed a few. Now for GDP, which I believe is the last indicator that I'm going to touch on, boosting productivity to attain double-digit GDP growth in Nigeria requires a comprehensive approach that addresses various key factors. Firstly, the government should focus on investing in critical infrastructure, such as transportation networks, power generation, telecommunications. Now, improved infrastructure will reduce production costs. It would enhance market access. It would attract more domestic and foreign investments, and of course, foster an environment for economic growth. Additionally, investing in education and skills development is very crucial. A well-educated and skilled workforce, Nigeria can drive innovation. Nigeria can increase efficiency and, of course, compete more effectively in the global market. Secondly, promoting a business-friendly environment is essential to encourage entrepreneurship, which is very necessary right now. I know that unemployment figures are terribly lagged, but the last figures that we did get were about 33.3%. So I imagine that if we get new numbers around that statistics, it will be significantly higher than that 33.3% that's in the public domain. Simplified regulations, reduced bureaucratic hurdles, and a transparent legal framework will attract investors and enable businesses to flourish, which by extension would have a positive ripple effect on job creation and, of course, ease unemployment figures. Nigeria should prioritize technological advancements and digitization to enhance productivity across industries. Encouraging the adoption of modern technologies can optimize processes, increase output, and support economic growth. I think I would also add that the government should support research and development, foster innovation and knowledge-based industries. It's important. Research and data, it really is like a flashlight that allows one to see clearly, and it allows one to strategize better. So it's an area that's usually neglected, but it's something I feel that should be picked up and placed on the front burner if we are to be serious with tackling some of these issues. Now, our expectation is that GDP will be sluggish in the next quarter. In the next quarter release, which is Q2, we should be getting those figures anytime from now. They should be coming out this August. Now, for Q3, the harvest season and then seasonal effects in Q4 should support GDP growth to an extent. I expect to see agriculture return to its growth trajectory. We did see a contraction when the Q1 numbers were released, but I return to growth trajectory. Perhaps nothing that will cause us to celebrate like a 5% or 4%, but a mild growth figure for that number. Why am I mentioning it? It accounts for over 20% of national output, and so I believe it's an important sector to always highlight. For full year 2023, the end of the year, we see GDP at just below 3%. I think that's all from me. I hope I stuck within your time frame.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Chinwe Egwim. Can we please give a very good round of applause for Ms. Egwim? That was quite elaborate and extensive, and quite also educating as well as exposing. We have in our midst the last, but not by any means the least, of the panelists. Dr. Okiti, could you please give us your view? You can.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me here today. So, Dr. Tariba, thank you so very much for that presentation. And thank you also to the two panelists that spoke before now. Let me just try and provide another dimension let me bring another dimension to this conversation because I think they've all spoken about different things, and I think it's not important that I repeat them. So when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was sworn in on May 29th, there was something that was very, very clear on the mind of everyone, and that is that we have a serious, severe macroeconomic instability problem. I mean, everyone knew that. So that was the major problem. Of course, there are other problems, but there were serious macroeconomic instability problem, debt high, inflation high, foreign exchange, I mean, pressure, balance of payment crisis. I mean, everything that is associated with macroeconomic instability was just offline. Okay. But there were 2 or 3 information that were not clear to everyone that has not become in a way clear now. One was that we did not know how much the government had actually borrowed, meaning that we did not know the exact numbers in terms of deficit and of course in terms of ways and means. That has now become something that we are all aware, or at least we think we still know some now compared to when President Muhammadu Buhari was in power. Because I think even those of us that thought that something like that was happening, none of us ever actually thought that there was some kind of, somebody was collecting 22 trillion backdoor. Make no mistake, that is serious inflation tax. So that is what is responsible for some of the macroeconomic instability that we have seen. That's number one. Number two, we did not also have the central bank publish its reports for over 5 years, I think about 7 years. And also there were rumors that the foreign reserves of 34 billion that we had was not real, that it was, what do you people call it? Voicemail, you know.
Gross.
Huh?
It is gross reserves.
No, that's economic term. Voicemail. I mean, so we didn't know what it was, but now we have an idea of what the problem was. So that information was also not available. And I think the third information that we did not have was that what else are we going to find in the system? So this is how this government started. So when this government started, I think there were two very important reforms that has happened, and they both happened within the first 2 weeks. And I remember commenting after the first subsidy was off. I mean, when it was removed, I remember commenting either waiting or breakfast meeting, I think I had. I said at the time that even though I would desire exchange rate reform, I will wait a bit before that is done. I will wait a bit because you want to see how the fuel removal of subsidy is behaving before you move to another set of reform. But that was not going to happen. It happened 2 weeks immediately after that. Okay, now, what is it that we also know now? We now have a confirmation that demand and supply of foreign exchange are both inelastic. That means demand and supply are not responding to price. We know some of the reasons, and I think Doctor has given some of the reasons, but at least we now know that they are not responding to price, because the initial thought was that if we just aggregate the exchange rates, then people will bring in dollar. But if you ask yourself, I mean, he's just like me setting up, a shop, an empty shop, and say, oh, people will come and buy something. It doesn't work like that. If people are going to bring in their US dollars to do something, then you have to actually show them what they are buying. So in the shortest possible time, in the short term, demand is inelastic. Supply is inelastic. So I am not surprised by the volatility that we have seen over the last two months. So if I were in government, and I think he also expatiated on that, we need to understand why is demand so inelastic. The truth of the matter is that everyone here, if we were in a church, we are not in a church, but if we were in the church and a preacher called us out and say, how many people want to travel? Everybody will come out. So travel there, you would think is about demand for dollars. Yes, but what I'm trying to say here is we are in a stampede. Nigeria is experiencing a stampede out. Anybody that was in Nigeria in the 80s and in the 90s will understand what I mean. The cheap people that are in their 20s now won't understand, but we were here in the 80s and in the 90s. The funny thing was I started with this same idiot. I mean, okay, sorry. It started with Buhari too. So disconnect those two. I'm just saying it started with Buhari. You don't want. So it's a stampede. So when you have a country that's in a stampede, what was missing in the last 2 months is not, there were two things. They were not supported by institutional reforms that talks with that. But those institutional reforms, nobody actually expected them to happen immediately. But there was no communication about them. So what I'm trying to say is that you did two important reforms, right? But for 8 weeks, there was no communication of, look, this is why I did it. This is what I expect. This is where we are going to. People may think that communication is not important, but communication is very, very critical if you are doing reforms. And we did not have communication at all. So what was the response of the market? The market started filling in the spaces. So if there's no communication, you now begin to act on the communication that you are getting or the signaling that you are getting. Because I'm an economist and I'm also into communication, I can understand this. It's just like husband and wife not talking. The husband they don't talk for 3 months. She will say, oh, the husband is cheating, even though the husband is only looking for money. So the point is that we have missed two important things. One, we did not quickly communicate the expectations that we expected from the reforms. We have allowed Nigerians and the foreign investors to key in their own thoughts about where we are going in. And of course, fear setting and of course, dollar started. That's number one. Number two is that there were key institutional things that could have been done. For instance, you remove fuel subsidy, but there were two major agencies set up for fuel subsidy. That's the one that says they are aggregating prices. I don't even want to be talking. No, I can't remember their name. They are all in Abuja there. Nothing was done about those institutions. Nothing was done about NNPC. Nothing was done about the structures that actually deliver the failure that we have. So people began to realize that, okay, maybe those reforms are not going to be as extensive as we think. And then the narrative started that it's just to make Nigerians suffer. I don't know if we get it. When the reforms were first of all done, it wasn't like that. People did not think it's just for Nigerians to suffer. We all started to think that, oh, this is something we have to bear for a while, right? But after a while, because there was no communication, everybody thought it's only meant for Nigerians to suffer. So I just thought to provide that context because that's the only aspect I probably thought I haven't heard. So what do I think will happen going forward? Two things I think will happen going forward. I don't know whether we will enter a recession, but I expect growth in the quarter to slow down considerably, if there's still any growth. If you're asking me why will growth slow down, it's very, very easy. It's very, very easy to tell. Very, very easy to tell. I mean, it's not only in terms of the price pressure, but economic activity has slowed down considerably. Just talk to any Uberman. Just any Uberman, talk to any market person, talk to anybody. There's really nothing really happening in terms of economic activity, at least not as the way we would like, especially when you are looking for growth. So I see slowdown in the next 1 or 2 quarters. I don't know whether we'll pick up in 2024. I don't know. That's number one. Number two, obviously, as Chinwe said, that's also what I expect. And I believe Doc will expect that inflation will probably get to that 25 points. That is the one that I think everybody agreed on when fuel subsidies were removed. The other point I think I want to add is this, and it's very, very important. Just to emphasize what Doc said, we know that reforms are important, but I think in Nigeria, we must be very, very careful and just agree, just as the Indians did. The Indians, especially if you read Why Growth Matters by two of the guys that actually did reforms in India. Institutions often do reforms, or let me say government often do reforms without taking into consideration whether institutions should be endogenous or exogenous to those reforms. But reforms in which institutional reforms are not in the reforms, they don't succeed. They don't succeed. So if all we are going to have in the coming months, in the coming years, especially given that we now know the people that will be ministers, and I'm sure most of you are not really excited about them. If there are no other reforms, and this is what we will have, then we may just be ready for another 2-3 years struggle. I don't know whether I've excited you or not, but that is really the way things are at the moment. Things are not going the way I would have loved it to go. I support reforms. I support these 2 reforms. However, they are not adequate to meet the need of Nigerians. As you are doing reforms, you don't stop talking about it. You don't stop talking about the objectives. And of course, you don't stop doing the reforms, because price reforms are never enough. So there are many reforms Doc has suggested. I'm sure if you ask him like 20 more, we need to move very, very quickly on those reforms. Before I close, let me mention one other gap that I saw that is also important to this conversation. As a president, there are 3 people that I think you should appoint on day 1. 3 people. You should appoint a chief economic advisor on day 1. You should appoint a foreign policy advisor on day 1. And you should appoint a national security advisor on day 1. To the best of my knowledge, he only appointed a national security advisor within the first week. No chief economic advisor and no foreign policy advisor. Go and check where the errors have been in the last 2 months. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Lcci. Dr. Okiti is a man that doesn't talk at the extreme, usually. He's somebody that selects his word. But he's a human being above all. So we, as humans, we are liable to occasional mistakes once in a while. And I don't think, knowing what I know of Dr. Okiti of over 2 decades, I think idiot wasn't the word he wanted to use. And I want to, on his behalf, retract that word. I thank him so much for his contribution, which was quite exposing, and all the other panelists. We have to continue quite briefly from Dr. Afolabi's submission. Dr. Olowokere is on the line. Could you please give us the concluding part of your views, Dr. Olowokere?
Okay, thank you very much. So a lot of—
Can you hear me, Dr. Olowokere?
Yes, please. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello, Dr. Olowokere, are you there?
Yes, I'm speaking. Can you hear me?
Okay, we'll go into the panelist session proper. Ms. Egwim, are you still online, please? Can you hear me? Right.
Yes, I can hear you.
Ms. Egwim, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I will let the House know when they finally come online. Meanwhile, we have one of the brightest light in the chamber online. I want to recognize the presence of a tireless man I've come to know in the past 6-7 months. He's the president of the chamber, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Ashiwaju, Dr. Michael Olawale. Can you hear me, please? You're welcome to today's occasion.
Thank you. I'm hearing you very well. Yes, I'm hearing you.
Hello, Dr. Olawale.
Hello. Yes, I'm hearing you.
Hello, Mr. President.
Yes, I'm hearing you very well. Yes. I'm hearing you.
We would have to move on to the next session, which is the panelist session. If you have questions you would have for our panelists, you can please get that across to me so that they can share their views on your concerns and worry. Meanwhile, the online has a very rich community of viewers and as well as listeners. Those online will welcome your questions, and we know our panelists would express their views to some of your fears, some of your hopes, some of your aspirations for the Nigerian economy. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Olowokere, are you back online? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm online. I can hear you, and we can hear others online. So maybe you can hear us.
Of your view on the Nigerian economy in the previous half year.
Okay, so thank you very much. Just to round up, I think a lot has been said about where we are. We've seen our currency weakening. We're expecting the convergence, but we've not seen the convergence. We've seen inflation inching up. It's interesting, even some government organizations now are saying you may not have to come to work for the whole of the days. That is kind of a reduction in economic activity in the second quarter, and that is most likely going to enter the third quarter, and then that's going forward into the economy. But a major issue that we then need to start thinking about as an economy is that if we continue along this path, we may not see the kind of growth, the kind of development, the kind of strengthening currency and competitiveness that we want. So there definitely has to be something done in order for us to change the trajectory. If we are to base the second half of the year on what happened in the first half. First half was denomination, demonetization. Second half, currency issue, as well as fuel subsidy removal. If we are to base our projection on that, we are going to say for the remaining part of the year, we may not actually do very well. But one thing is also very important, and I'm very sure now that the new government is coming with its cabinet, even though there are maybe questions around certain members of that cabinet, we believe they should be able to know that these are very important things, and these are very important and critical time for the economy. Dr. Tariba said something the other time that is very important. You don't want your economy to be used as a guinea pig. You don't want to just turn an economy to a laboratory and then being able to see what happened to your economy. One important thing that we must learn as an economy is that we have been here before. What are the lessons that we can draw from those exams? We've tried them before, they didn't work. But we need to sit down, and I'm sure maybe the president understands this far better than all of us. He has all his advisors and cabinet coming in. They should be able to see that people may tell us to do certain things, remove subsidy, they may tell us harmonize the exchange rate, but when those things backfire, most of those people will also still come back and say, oh, we didn't want to remove it as this much. We could have done it this way. Sequencing was wrong. We should have done it this way. So critical analysis we need to do on some of these things. Otherwise, as Dr. Tariba said, we are going to open up the patient and you are then looking for how to resuscitate someone that is in a coma. You are supposed to have done some of those things even before now. So we need a very holistic with our policy environment. We need by taxing people who are already very much taxed, but some of his explanations are very useful in terms of asset sales, asset-based backed securities. But we should also be very careful with government. Sometimes when you mention some of these things, they actually do an outright sale of such. So it's not just enough for the government to start selling assets, but to see how to unlock capital from existing assets so that we can move forward as a country. And for now, we need to start looking at how do we balance market system and the kind of system that we are running, which government also wants to do some kind of welfare things together. Market should not be seen as an objective, but an instrument in the hand of the state. Market is an instrument, government is an instrument, both in the hand of the state, and they must be used for the welfare of the citizens. If some of these things are not done properly, the fear is that what we have in the first quarter, most likely in the second quarter, may go throughout the rest of the year, and that may not be very good for the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Olowokere. Thank you so much. We have a list of questions from our online community and as well as some from our audience, our real-time audience. I will start with one on the from our online community. Yes, and this questions is particularly directed to Dr. Tariba. Well, how can the private sector prevail on government policies and decision makers to be circumspect in their policy direction? After all, okay, how can the private sector prevail on government policy and decision makers to be circumspect in their policy directions? Let's consider them in their policy direction. Yeah.
Not to be taking them one.
Yes.
One by one.
Yes.
But I thought we can also let them.
We have a lot of them. We have some questions here.
Yeah. Excuse me.
I can recall.
I have a bit of code, yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for the contributions, from the co-panelists. And well, this is a private sector event, hosted by the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's meant for engagement. Typically, it's not just for private sector deliberations. As I said, in previous occasions, government officials will join us, and it will be an opportunity for exchange of ideas between government and private sector with a view towards building a consensus on what policy directions should be or what policies should be advocated. And that's that is described, in economic literature, is that the private sector can exercise their voice option. You can say what you desire, what we like to see. Early in my career, I spent a brief period at the UAC and then joined the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry as a principal research officer at the time. And so from the early stage, my career has been, influenced by the practice of the chamber, in which, deliberations, even at the council, was geared towards trying to build an elite consensus. And once you have that consensus, you also try to provide thought leadership, to the government. And I remember then I thought I joined at the tail end of the Babangida regime, when he just put Chief Shonekon and a few people in Transition Council. And so Transition Council became interim government. Interim government gave way to the Abacha regime. Those were the days when I was, in the research department. I had responsibility for articulating the views of the chamber. We made several releases, in the newspaper and the rest of it. So I do think that, and it influenced changes. The government will not ignore the voice of the organized private sector. And I've seen, that blossom. I was still here as a staff of the chamber when the economic summit group started. It started right here in the chamber when Mr. Adekunle Olumide, the then DG of the chamber, hosted the Kramer and a group of people, and when they were trying to start the economic summit group. And so the chamber was a part of that advocacy, and those engagements had gone on to shape a considerable amount of government policy. So it's not about being confrontational or being unduly critical. The government needs the input, of the private sector. And so the motivation, or we're hoping that what we say are constructive suggestions, that if the government take them on board, we'll go on to improve the outlook of the economy. I speak, from a neutral position. These are the things I will say to you if, a private company invited me, for example, to speak to their board, or a government agency invites me to speak to them, as often happens. And also I'm an independent, economist, and my credibility depends on me continuing to be independent. So it doesn't really matter which party is there or which party is not there. People expect that, the views that you provide are not influenced, by any parochial interests, but they are made in the best interests of the country. So I'll say that the best way is still to be a part, contribute to efforts to build consensus, And in your own little corner, say those things. There might be people you as an individual can reach that we cannot reach. Say those things. And I know that government is listening to us, and that eventually many of the things that we say, we'll see them, come to light. Let me pause there.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Teriba. There are some other concerns too. We have from our audience here a particular question that Ms. Egwim, I'm throwing at Ms. Egwim. Can you hear me, Ms. Egwim?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. From one of our listeners or from the audience, this is the question. Is there any hope for the manufacturing sector growth in the near term?
Okay, thank you for that. That's a good question. Near-term depends on what the definition of near-term is, right? For me, near-term is really till the end of this year. For some, near-term could be taken into consideration next year. And so I think I'll use the latter. Yes, there is hope. We do engage different stakeholders. We do hear things like FX liquidity would get better. Some of the liquidity sources that I couldn't list, behind the scenes, we can see that they're taking deliberate steps to try to boost FX liquidity. And why am I focusing on FX? Because the manufacturing sector does depend on FX for its imported inputs. And so when we see changes in the FX or the exchange rate dynamics, it does affect output levels that we see in the national accounts for that sector. Now, with regards to inflation, I think companies, what I'm about to say now, I would expect that companies are already doing this, looking for innovative solutions that would help them not just boost client acquisition, but also maintain or retain their market share. Because when I was speaking, I did talk about purchasing power being eroded. And for the manufacturing sector, at least specific segments of manufacturing, consumption patterns are important to boost your sales or to keep sales at favorable levels. So innovative strategies, things around marketing, things around actual strategy, things around using, as I said earlier, research and to know where to put your energy as a company, allow for better guidance with regards to how you're taking your different strategic steps. What else would I mention? Borrowing. Well, I did say that if we continue to see policy rate hikes, that borrowing costs are likely to go up as well. So in the near term, I would say, is there hope? I would say that there is hope towards the end of the near term, and my definition is towards the end of next year, not this year, of near term. So I hope I answered that question effectively.
Yeah, thank you very much. Near time, Ms. Egwim definition of the near time is about 18 months. My next question is to the panelist, Dr. Okiti. In your own view, Dr. Okiti, what downside risk should the government and businesses focus on in the second half of 2023? And what strategies should they adopt to mitigate them?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone again. I think the most important downside risk we should all focus on, whether in government or in business, is that we don't worsen the macroeconomic instability. And if that is the goal, then the most important thing to do now is to stabilize the exchange rate. The reason is that if you are not able to stabilize the exchange rate now, it's just going to make the economy worse in terms of volatility. And then, of course, everyone would totally lose confidence. So there's already a very, very weak confidence in the Nigerian economy, worsening in volatility of the exchange rate, weakening Naira will only worsen the situation. And we don't want to go further on that journey. I really genuinely hope that we can deal with that risk, whether it's 930 or whether it's 950, whether it's 910, as someone told me this morning. Even if it's not coming down, at least ensure that we stabilize at that level for a minimum of 3 to 6 months. Because doing 20% depreciation within 2 months of an already 40% devaluation before then is not a recipe for investment, for growth, and of course, for jobs. It's only going to worsen macroeconomic instability. So if there's any major risk at the moment, the foreign exchange problem is like a fire, God forbid, a fire in this building. A fire in this building, you are not looking for laptop, you are not looking for your phone, and of course, you are not looking for, you're not worried about your suit. You just want to get out and be alive. So that is the way I see the exchange rate volatility at the moment is just too severe within a very, very short period of time. So how do you deal with that? Two things in my own opinion. I think that greater attention should have been paid to oil theft. I know that the government is doing something about it, but I am not sure whether it is drastic enough. We need the dollars from that side. That's number one. Number two, I genuinely think that there was significant pent-up demand of dollars, especially by foreign nationals, whether it's aviation, whether it's before the devaluation. Some people say 5 billion, some people say 8 billion US dollars. I genuinely think the government should have had a conversation with them and said, look, we are not going to go back to controls, but please bear with us over an 18, 24-month period. Stabilize your economy, because that is where our greatest risk is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lcci. The last question will be Dr. Lcci to provide insights to. Dr. Lcci, are you there? Can you hear me, Dr. Lcci? Dr. Lcci, can you hear me, please? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me. Let me just help us with insight on these questions. Considering the reforms introduced by the government, particularly fuel subsidy removal and the exchange rate unification, do you think the projection by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is realistic?
Okay, thank you. Maybe there are two ways to look at this. IMF projection is very important, but do we also even have our own internal projection? This current government wants to be doing around 6%, even though you may say that will not be for the first year, but at least they want to do that on the average in the next 4 years. IMF will probably be in the range of 3 to 3.2% for us as a country, and then maybe in near term 2.9%, then 3%, where our own Agenda 2050 of National Development Plan is trying to do about 4.4%. So IMF is even very conservative compared to what we want to do as a country in our development plan, as well as what the new administration wants to do. So 3.2% to me is still low, not really a very big task for a country like Nigeria to achieve, especially given that we are also not coming from a very big growth base. So we can still do 3.2%. But when we now look at what we did in the first quarter and what we are likely to do in second quarter and this third quarter, then that casts doubt on the possibility of being able to do that at the end of the year. I mean, I've been able to do about 3 to 3.2%. But that is also a call to the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to know that nothing stops us as a country because we just have about one and a half quarters to be able to remedy what has happened in the second and third quarter. So if what we currently experience continues, it casts doubt on our ability to achieve 3.2%. But I would say 3.2% is still not what Nigeria cannot ordinarily achieve because that is in a very low growth for a country of Nigerian size and our developmental need. However, if we continue this way, many businesses are finding it difficult. I mean, if you walk around, you see people are not trekking, people keep more fit now. There are businesses that are finding it difficult to buy fuel to be able to generate power. And I'm also talking to the point that some have raised before now. In places where this kind of policies are also done, you are able to refine your fuel. You don't need to buy a lot of fuel to power your generator and the rest. So we need to do something about this quickly. So to me, it's not about meeting the target of IMF at 3.2%. It's for the government to know that you need to do something so that at least our growth this year can be in the range of 3%. But even at 3%, 3.2% is still relatively low compared to what we want to do as a country at 4.4% in our Agenda 2050, as well as what the administration wants to do in terms of 6% for the next 4 years.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lcci. Meanwhile, I have this information, please. The owner of the vehicle number LSD 381 GY, please, you're needed outside. The vehicle number again, LSD 381 GY. Okay, thank you. With the submission from Dr. Lcci, we pull down the curtain on the panelist session.
No, I have.
You still have some. Okay, Dr. Teriba still has some contributions to make.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. By way of rejoinder, having listened to the panelists, I was hoping that there will be questions from, across the room. But let me say the following. Dr. Gitti has emphasized an aspect, a problem that the government met. He said instability, which is where you bundle the issues of the exchange rates, instability in the exchange rate, inflation, and the rest of it. While not disagreeing with him, I want to modify that point and say that Nigeria's instability is not the problem. That instability is merely a symptom of the problem. Because unless we get that clarity, it won't be clear what it is that we want the government to do. But he also implied this in saying that the government should approach, the world's global capitals, put the assets on the table and attract foreign direct investment with it. Nigeria's problem on the economy is one, and that's illiquidity. Government lacks fiscal liquidity. Nigeria lacks external liquidity going by the reserves. And the financial system, whether you are talking of banks, bonds, or stock market, lacks systemic liquidity. So if you draw an analogy with human physiology or with the medical practice, you are saying that the patient does not have enough blood in his or her system. And everybody knows that a patient that is deficient in blood will show symptoms. Will show symptoms, a lot of symptoms. Don't waste your time dwelling on the symptoms. Go for the root cause of the symptoms. So things we are saying about growth, things we are saying about exchange rate, inflation, are symptoms. Instability is a symptom of illiquidity. Growth reversal, recession, is a symptom of illiquidity. If a patient doesn't have enough blood, he will emaciate. And that's what is happening. So find liquidity and those problems will disappear. So the key priority of the government, what the government should have been engaging all of us about from day one, is how to fund the fiscal situation without borrowing more. The 33 trillion that they were planning to borrow on top of 49 trillion, raise equity and raise enough, not just to repay the 22 trillion ways and means and the deficit for this year, raise enough to raise the reserves, the foreign reserve of Nigeria, maybe to $100 billion US. Don't listen to the IMF, who is telling you to tighten further. Get liquidity and you can ease monetary policy and the Naira will be stable. And the biggest loss, by the way, to Nigeria is that we allowed the exchange rate to go to the region where it is now, 1,000 to $1. Don't worry about 4.2% GDP growth or 2.9%. You are just wasting your time debating Naira GDP growth. Wake up to what 1,000 Naira per dollar means for Nigeria's GDP. We pride ourselves as being the biggest economy in Africa. Not anymore. We allowed the currency to slide from $160, $150 when we became the biggest economy in the world. We are now at 950. By the way, at the old official rates, 460 or thereabout, Egypt, that was just 2/3 of our economy in 2015, has caught up with us. We are currently, based on 2022 GDP, we are both on $480 billion. And with the slide in our currency, when theirs is more stable than ours, by the time this, the GDP figures reflects the exchange rate for 2023, by the end of the year, we'll be lucky if we have 360 billion. And they will jump up. Yes, you are talking about 4.2% growth in what? In Naira GDP. There's no growth in Naira GDP. There's no growth in GDP. GDP is on a steady decline. It was 580. Then we announced that we were the biggest in Africa. It's 480 now. And we'll be lucky if it's not less than 360 in the next few months. And on Chinwe's point, is there hope? I dare say that even as bad as the situation is, there is more than hope. Unlike maybe any other country in Africa, or anywhere in the world, Nigeria can just turn a switch and there will be light. And so we have lost income. We are not the only one who is losing income. Export is declining, GDP is declining. We are not the only one. It's the experience more or less of nearly, of countries who do what I'm suggesting now that Nigeria should do are the only ones that are growing. The world, commodity prices are weak and therefore growth opportunities are slim. But the world is awash with liquidity. The world stock of FDI has been doubling every 10 years from 20 trillion in 2010 to 40 trillion in 2020. And by 2027, it will be 80 trillion. So only countries who succeed in getting a good share of that FDI are able to compensate for what they are losing in exports and fuel growth. So Nigeria's problem is liquidity. We are in a country where both exports and FDI stocks are declining, and you have the assets to stop the decline of your FDI stock, you have the assets to replenish reserves. That was what Saudi did since 2017. They put, if you go to the National Council of Privatization website in Saudi now, they say 200 projects in 16 sectors. That's how they took themselves out of the crisis that falling commodity prices represent. One of those 200 projects is Aramco. You did listed, it was 1.7 trillion when they listed, it's now 2.1 trillion, 400 billion in 4 years. Their GDP is only 850 billion. Let's stop talking about GDP. We are not rich in GDP. We are rich in assets. Let's talk about what we are rich on. India is not doing 200 projects. They are doing 15,000 projects. Go to their website, India Investment Grid. They have 15,000 assets. They are looking for $2 trillion. And they are getting 40 billion minimum every year. They don't have more assets than Nigeria. So Mr. Buhari did well in what did he do? He reconstituted MOFI. And he said they have 18 trillion in assets that they have already captured. And he charged them to go to 100 trillion. President Tinubu should run with that. So hope is not in the future. There's hope now. And the hope is in those assets. And to add more to the assets and to push MOFI to optimize the assets. And see, the governing council of MOFI is chaired by the president himself. So there's no reason why MOFI should not have oversight over any MDA or any other investment owned by the government. The Minister of Petroleum is a member of the governing council. The CBN governor is a member of the governing council. And their respective chief executive of NNPC and are members of the, is the board of the MOFI. So there's hope in Nigeria's assets. There's hope in MOFI. The sooner that the president sees that opportunity as the first priority to recharge the fiscal situation, recharge the foreign exchange reserve, stabilize the Naira. If we can get the Naira back, to levels before the unification, it will be in the best interest of the country. Otherwise, it's not only Egypt that will overtake Nigeria. Many more African countries are likely to overtake Nigeria. You won't be first, you won't be second. And you'll be lucky if you are third. So if you don't recharge liquidity to stabilize the exchange rate, I'm sorry, I share Dr. Okiti's fears. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me just ask Doctor one question before you go. I mean, by the way, I agree with you. I mean, you say liquidity, can either call it macroeconomic imbalances, instability, liquidity. I mean, they are all the same thing. But the one I'm very particular about here. You were part of that MOFI, right? The initial this thing. And I went to their website yesterday. I saw what they are trying to do. I saw the assets that accounted for the 18 trillion. So, because reform is about timing, it's about sequence, it's about the time frame. What is disturbing us now? What is preventing us from going the way you want us? I agree we should go that way. But what is this? What are we waiting for? I don't think, and I want you to, I don't think those assets they put on MOFI, I don't think they are ready in terms of book arrangement. What I mean by book arrangement, auditors or wherever it is, preparation for market listing. I don't think they've done that. And I don't know whether there's a process in place to do that. So please.
Okay, well, yes, I was one of those that advocated, the restructuring of MOFI, and I was on the MOFI restructuring committee, and it was as constituted by the then Minister of Finance, Dr. Zainab Ahmed, and she ran with it, got the president to approve it, and the president inaugurated it. So I was, I would say I am a member of the governing council of MOFI. but you have a new president. It's the president that chairs the council, and presumably he's been busy. The typical thing is that the governing council will meet every 3 months, at least once a quarter. So we had only one meeting with the outgone president. President Buhari inaugurated us on 1st of February, and we met with him on the 2nd of May, which was a few days to his exit. And I guess the little mileage that Murphy has gained at the approvals received, at that governing council meeting. So I don't know how soon it will be before President Tinubu, because Murphy will be waiting on him. Murphy cannot outrun the president. Yes. So the Murphy has to fall in line with whatever President Tinubu considers his priority. So all eyes are on President Tinubu. And by the way, one of the ministerial nominees, Mr. Olawale Edun, I think he's also on the board of Murphy. But I can't speak on behalf of the president. I can't speak on behalf of Mr. Edun. We have to wait and let them reveal their preference. Let them reveal whether they consider Murphy to have the same order of priority in their own thinking as. Okay, so all we can do here as exercise our voice option, provide some clarity on the direction we think things should move. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Dr. Teriba is of the view that we should unlock liquidity by way of equity financing. He would rather see the nation raise enough liquidity higher than foreign the nation's store of forex reserve. On that note, on that positively bright note, we pull down the curtain on the panelist session. The next item on the program is, I would like to call on the Director General, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, for the closing remarks. Dr. Chinyere Almona.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for being here till this time. The Media Economic Review and Outlook is a flagship program of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And it's such an important program that it sits across two very important committees. So the Advocacy Committee that is chaired by Prince Olashore, and the Economic and Statistics Committee chaired by Dr. Teriba. They both kind of come together to make this program happen. That's how important this media review is for us. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank the speakers. I want to thank Dr. Teriba, first of all, for providing the context. He kind of, sometimes when I listen to Dr. Teriba, at some points, I'm depressed and unhappy about the outcomes. At other times, I'm hopeful, and I'm glad that today we ended on a hopeful note. He summarized the Nigerian problem as the need for liquidity. So we have one thing to tackle, and he's given a lot of ideas that the government needs to run with. I believe that the outcome, the communique from this program will get to government, and we want to believe that over the next couple of months, we'll continue to push and make sure that these things are taken to book. I want to thank the leadership of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, led by our president, Asiwaju Dr. Michael Olawale Cole. I believe he's still online. I want to thank you, sir, for making sure that we continue in the trajectory of hosting this very important program. I want to thank all council members here present for being here and for supporting us. I also want to thank my team. I thank Tony, the director of our Advocacy and Research Department, and his team. I think they're like the three wise men. He has three solid men behind him. And so I want to thank them for all the work that this entailed. The panelists, Dr. Kitty, thank you. I thank Ms. Chinwe Gwim, who joined us online, and Dr. Folabi Olowokere for their perspectives and just guiding us through the different issues that we have discussed today. I saw a very interesting quote once by Lee Hyun Seo, who said that among the difficulties that he has experienced in life, financial, economic problems are the worst. And he says because financial hardship could limit one's ability to realize one's dream, no matter how desperate and earnest you are. We believe that things have been hard in Nigeria and we are all struggling. Everybody you talk to, every business person you talk to has a story to tell, not too nice story. But as we leave this stage on a hopeful note, there is hope in Nigeria. Please say to yourself, there is hope. There is hope in Nigeria. And we're going to go off and do all that it takes to make these things happen. I want to thank everyone for being attentive in today's discussions and for all the questions that have come through. I just want to say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, everybody. Just for photo operation. Madam.
Is it here?
Yeah. Sunday. Yes.